This conference will now be recorded.
The Clatsop County Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, February 8th, 2022 will come to order. Would staff please take the roll?
Christopher Farrar,
Present.
John Orr,
Present.
Lam Kwang,
Here.
Harry Johnson is excused, Nadia Gardner,
Present.
Clancy Adams present, Gail Henriksen,
Here.
and Ian Sisson.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like we also have staff today, Julia Decker and Jason Pollock, and some members of the public and an applicant. So I'd like to welcome the public. The Planning Commission is the official venue for public involvement in planning and community development for Clatsop County. We thank you for your interest and involvement and always welcome your thoughts via email and verbal public comments. We'll move on now to the agenda. I'll take a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as presented.
I move we accept the agenda as presented for the February 8th, 2022 meeting.
I'll second that.
Sounds like we have a motion from Commissioner Farrar and a second from Commissioner Orr. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 The motion passes unanimously. All right, we'll move on now to the election of officers. Staff, do you want to give a little intro to this, please?
Yes. So our bylaws require the Planning Commission to elect a chair and a vice chair at the first meeting of every calendar year. I left that off your agenda last month, so I apologize for that, but we do need to address that today. And then the chair and the vice chair would take effect at the end of today's meeting.
Thank you, Director Henriksen. I think we all forgot. So, I think currently I am the chair, and I think John Orr is the vice chair. I'll take a motion if anyone has one, or and a second, and then we can do a little discussion after that.
Well, I have a nomination. I don't know if we do this by a nomination or a motion, but I think in the past we've just put a nomination up and then we take a vote on that individual, and rather than have two nominees up at the same time. Can you comment on that, Director Henriksen, if I've got that right?
Yes, that's correct. So the nomination is just that, and it does not need a second. And that's the way that we've done that in the past.
Thank you for that
Okay,
clarification to you both.
Thank you for that. And with that, I would like to nominate, or I am nominating Nadia Gardner to be chair for the next year. I think she's done well in her position, and it takes a little time to figure out how to do that well. So I don't want to lose that experience.
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Farrar and Commissioner Orr. I'd be happy to serve if you'll still have me, but I welcome other leadership as well.
This is Commissioner Orr. I believe that my term ends in June of 2022, and because of the demands of my time and my work, I'm not going to seek in any way to continue that. It's been an honor to serve, but in light of that fact, that I deem it prudent to recommend to the board that they replace me as the vice chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Orr. I've never taken advantage of your service, but I might have to do it one of these days for the vice chair. Well, so
Okay, so at this point, I've nominated Nadia Gardner for chair, so I believe we should vote on that issue.
thank you, Commissioner Farrar. Okay, so if you want to move on, we could take a vote on Nadia Gardner as chair. It's a little awkward for me to preside over that decision making, but I guess that's how it's done. So should we go ahead and vote? All those in favor of Nadia Gardner as chair for 2022, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, sounded like that was unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so it sounds like Commissioner Orr has stepped back from interest of continuing as vice chair. So we're looking for a nomination of one of the other three. So right now we have Commissioner Johnson, Commissioner Kwong, and Commissioner Farrar.
Can we nominate people who aren't here?
Seems like we could, but it wouldn't really be fair.
That's part of the idea.
I wonder if we were interested in that, we could possibly, if we ask staff, continue until Commissioner Johnson is here. Also, actually, Director Henriksen, what's the timeline on bringing on new members at this point? I know we had a meet and greet.
Yeah, there was the meet and greet on January 29th, and we've submitted an item for February 23rd for the appointments, and it will be at the board's discretion if they want to appoint anyone at that meeting.
So potentially we will have a new person or two, actually, at the next meeting.
However, correct me if I'm wrong, our bylaws lay out this need to elect officers at the first meeting. And so I'm not sure if we really have a choice here to delay picking a vice chair.
Well, I would like to nominate Chris Ferrara as the vice chair of the Planning Commission, if you're willing to accept. Chris?
Well, I do appreciate that nomination. And in the past, I've been hesitant to take on that role, but our current chair seems to be in good health and is very responsible in attending the meetings. So I feel comfortable in taking the vice chair position and hope that I'm not called on too much. But I do appreciate your confidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wong and Farrar. I think we can go ahead and vote on that nomination. All those in favor of Commissioner Farrar as vice chair for 2022, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? All right, we unanimously elect Commissioner Farrar as vice chair. Thank you. Let's move on. Before our minutes, we'll do business from the public. This is our opportunity for anyone to give a presentation about any land use planning issue or county concern that is not on the agenda today. All speakers from the floor are to state their name and address before speaking. If you're appearing in a representative capacity, please identify who you represent. Do we have anyone that is interested in speaking today? Hearing none, we'll move on to our minutes. For the minutes of the Planning Commission regular meeting, January 11th, 2022, does anyone have corrections?
I'm not sure I have a correction exactly, but I did want to bring up a question I had, and that is, I'm looking at the minutes here as I speak. We discussed accessory dwelling units for considerable time at one point in the meeting, and I'm trying to remember exactly what kind of process we went through. In the minutes, there's a list of discussion topics given as little bullet points, and I'm trying to recall whether the commissioners actually took a vote or got a consensus reading on some of these discussion topics, such as the difference between the ADUs and the short-term rentals, and whether or not the commissioners were in agreement about whether short-term rentals should be allowed in those rural areas. It seemed to me that we had taken a position on some of these, and I don't see that the position is clearly noted here. And I'm wondering if Director Henriksen or someone in the staff could comment on that. Correct me if I'm wrong at what took place during that meeting.
Yes, there were several items that were discussed, and those you did make recommendations. I don't remember that there was a formal vote on each recommendation, but it was more discussion and consensus. And those are scheduled to go to the board for a work session on April 20th. And there was not anything formal to vote on or to make a formal recommendation on. There was nothing to approve. It was a discussion, and the board's or the planning commission's discussion was that accessory dwelling units should require a public hearing. They're already limited to areas where the minimum lot size is 2 acres, so that would automatically exclude some of the areas that I think were of concern, particularly Cove Beach. So that's my recollection of the events that occurred. I can certainly go back and verify that.
I think it would be appropriate to wait to approve these minutes until we clarify if there was either a vote or a consensus of the commission to pass on our opinion, the planning commission's opinion on such things as short-term rentals. We also had quite a discussion around the square footage of the ADUs allowed and the relative coverage of the lots. And I had thought that we as a commission had kind of come to some agreement on what we wanted the Board of Commissioners to understand as the view of the Planning Commission. And to me, it's not really clear here. It's more like, well, we discussed these things, which is true, we did. But I think anytime we kind of reach some consensus and opinion that would be helpful to the Board of Commissioners in their considering these matters, that should be really clear in the minutes because they serve as a record.
So if I understand what you're asking, Commissioner Farrar, you want us to go back and add more detail to the minutes, is that correct?
Yes, specifically if there seemed to be agreement amongst us that we would actually recommend to the county commissioners that they, restrict certain kinds of things in these rural areas, at least initially. I thought we had thought that, adding ADUs in a rural area, since it's already allowed in certain areas, that we'd take a slower approach to not expand that universally, but to first see how well it works initially and see if any problems arise. And I would like the Board of Commissioners to understand that we don't want to restrict this kind of thing, but we think when there's a big change coming, a big potentially a whole lot of land could be affected, that it would be better to kind of phase it in where we can see the effects of it. And I would like that opinion to go clearly to the board. And I'm kind of hogging the discussion here, so I don't know if any of the other commissioners have a recollection of it. Maybe I'm blowing it out of proportion. I'm not sure.
I think we can see this, hopefully this is an opportunity for, I know that staff will prepare a memo, a staff report for the county commissioners around this issue. And so this is our opportunity as a group to maybe look again at what we did decide by consensus at that last meeting to make sure that it's accurate so that they can include that in that memo with our full support. I do agree, like I think there was decision making that happened, and it's not reflected in these minutes. So what I might suggest is that we continue these minutes to the next meeting, giving staff an opportunity to make those additions and then look at them again at that meeting, if that makes sense to everybody. Yes, Director Henriksen.
Yes, so I pulled up on the screen the table that we worked with at our last meeting on January 11th. And based on what Commissioner Ferrara is saying and what I'm hearing, it sounds like the minutes are only a summary of what happened at the meeting. We are not mandated as staff to provide verbatim minutes. But it sounds like, based on what we talked about January 11th and the direction I'm hearing now, where January 11th, the agreement at that meeting was that a public hearing would be required, and maybe it could be loosened after 3 to 5 years if it wasn't an issue, but there wasn't talk about phasing them in different parts of the county and things like that. And so it sounds to me like you wanted to go back and revisit all your recommendations, and that would need to be done outside of just the minutes, because the minutes are a reflection of what happened. You can't revise the minutes to say, well, we didn't like that decision, we're going to change it. So if we can certainly add this table as an attachment to the minutes and bring them back to you next month, which is the accurate reflection of what you discussed in January. But if you want to continue to have discussion about this topic, then we'd need to schedule it in March as a discussion item for further recommendations and revisions.
Well, I'd be perfectly comfortable with you just attaching the table. That is a good summary. That's a good way to show it. It kind of pigeonholes things where somebody can rapidly look it through. So I'm okay with that. That sounds reasonable.
The one thing I remember, I mean, from my perspective, that I wanted front and center for the commissioners is that we already have ADUs, that are allowed in on a lot of parcels, any place that there are sanitary services. And so I'd like to look at that first before we expand, and also, consider marketing the fact that that's an opportunity, so that, because, as we've discussed, anyway, so I think that's one thing, and I don't know if that's reflected in this table. I understand that minutes are not supposed to be like word for word, and there's a video for that, right? But I do think when there is overreaching consensus decision making, we could just have like a few, 6 bullets that say, look at where it's allowed already, public hearings, at least for the first 3 to 5 years, 2 acres, no short-term rentals, parking, square footage, like just like bullets to make it really easy, because I feel like people will not wait. I mean, the county commissioners may, but for me, it's just about making it really easy and accessible for us, but also for the public. I haven't seen minutes where you don't include decision making in them. So I think if people agree, we should just go ahead and vote on a continuation. And I think Chris was just kind of was trying to remember exactly what we talked about. He wasn't necessarily proposing new changes. And I think we'll, if the commissioners do decide, yes, we should do this, then it'll come back to us and we can have more discussion later about some of those things. I don't see the need to open it back up again at the next meeting if the other commissioners agree.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I understand that point that these are summary minutes, and with the video taping of these meetings, it's not necessary to make them highly detailed. And it's easier for people to go through a relatively short document. But I do feel like just making a little more clarification on a couple of points would be helpful. So I'd be in favor of delaying approval until a minor modification is made and we take it up at the next monthly meeting.
Would you like to make a motion to that effect?
I would. I move that we delay approval of the minutes for the January 11th meeting until some minor clarifications are added to the consensus views of the Planning Commission on issues relative to ADUs.
Do we have a second to that motion?
Yeah, I'll second to that.
We have a motion from Commissioner Farrar and a second from Commissioner Kwong to continue the minutes of January 11th Clatsop County Planning Commission to the next meeting, allowing staff the opportunity to summarize consensus-based decision-making at that meeting. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. That the motion passes unanimously. Let's move on to our public hearings. Thank you for your patience. So we're at agenda item number 3. This is a quasi-judicial hearing regarding conditional use request 21-000-591 by Jose Antonio Velasquez Silva and Susana Juanosta to legalize an existing home occupation on property they own in unincorporated Clatsop County. The property address is 34074 West Campbell Loop in Seaside. We'll start by declarations by the commissioners. So if you'll answer these questions if need be here, commissioners. Does any commissioner have ex parte contacts of interest to report? Does any commissioner have a conflict of interest to report?
I do not.
So I guess I just want to note that I do know I've been in this neighborhood in the past, so I have not been there in recent years, and I do know neighbor Dale Barrett from previous work long ago. But I do not believe that causes provides any conflict of interest from my part or any bias as well, as we have talked about. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the commission to hear the matter at this time? All right, we'll move on. Will the staff please make their report?
Thank you, Chair Gardner. Good morning, commissioners. I'm Ian Sisson, Senior Planner with the Community Development Department. I have a quick presentation of the staff report for you, and then I'll be happy to take any questions you have. So this application is a conditional use permit to legalize an existing home occupation, which is a construction contracting business. This business has been operated for approximately 6 or more years. There has not been a conditional use permit on hand for these activities. This application was submitted to resolve that issue. And as Chair Gardner mentioned, the property is located on West Campbell Loop. That is approximately 2.5 miles east of the Cannon Beach Junction, just off Highway 26. The property is in the RA1 zone, residential agriculture 1. It is also in the flood hazard overlay and peripheral big game habitat, and there is also an area of the property mapped with wetlands per the statewide wetlands inventory. The application was deemed complete on November 18, 2021. The 150-day deadline to issue a final decision, including any local appeals, is April 17th of this year. The staff recommendation is approval with conditions. So this application is typically, or this application type is typically processed as a type 2, which doesn't require a public hearing. However, during the initial public comment period, there were a few comments that were received in opposition to the application that raised issues with some of the experiences neighbors have had living next to the subject property over the past several years while this business has operated without permits. And those comments are included in the attachments and just kind of generally detail some negative experiences neighbors say they have had, including road maintenance issues and traffic and parking and noise, and activities that are more intensive than what the applicant had described in the application materials. So in consideration of those comments and the history of the unpermitted activities taking place on the property, this application was placed on your agenda to review in a public hearing format. So another public notice was distributed on January 14th, 2022. And as of this morning, we've received 9 additional public comments, and those latest 9 were each in support of the application. Those have been provided to the commissioners via email, and they have also been posted onto our Acela e-permitting website for public review. So applicable review criteria for home occupations. The criteria are all listed on page 4 of the staff report, which is page 8 in your agenda packet. A home occupation conditional use is defined here as shown on the screen. There are limits on the number of employees and reference to the standards that apply in section 3.8000. That section includes objective regulations which apply to all home occupations in Clatsop County. Those generally limit home occupations to ensure neighborhood impacts are minimized. And so if this application was to be approved, each of those regulations would apply automatically. Section 2.4000 is the general conditional use review criteria, and that evaluates the operating characteristics of the business, the suitability of the site to accommodate the proposal, and impacts to surrounding properties. These are more subjective and they require more discretion to evaluate and to determine whether the proposal is appropriate or not. The priority for home occupations is to establish appropriate limitations to ensure the use doesn't unreasonably disrupt the neighborhood. So while section 3.8000 establishes a baseline for all home occupations, this section provides opportunity to establish additional conditions that might be necessary to limit the use based on the specific operating characteristics and the geographical setting of a particular proposal. So staff has recommended several conditions of approval to limit business activities, and those were imposed based on some of the concerns that were raised by neighbors during the public comments, and generally the type of operating characteristics that you might see from this type of business. So those conditions are listed on pages 17 through 19 of the staff report, which is 21 to 23 of your agenda packet. So the staff recommendation is approval. This approval recommendation is based on the activities as described by the applicant, which again, some of the neighbors have said the activities that were presented by the applicant in the application may not be an accurate reflection of the business activities that have been taking place over the past several years. So as staff, we're reviewing the application as presented and making findings based on that, but also taking into consideration what the neighbors have put forth as some of the issues they've observed to make sure that those things don't happen if this application is approved. So the conditions of approval are listed here. The first one is to obtain a development permit within 30 days, including a signed agency review and approval form. The important thing with the agency review form is to make sure that the fire department is aware of the business activities and any materials that might be stored in the shop building, as well as to make sure that the septic system has capacity for employees to be using the required restroom. There's also a condition to incorporate some site obscuring fencing or evergreen vegetation along the front property line to limit the visibility of the property from adjacent neighbors and also to dampen noise. Condition number 3 requires all outdoor light fixtures to comply with Ordinance 2002. Condition number 4 requires the home occupation to be conducted in a manner to limit the output of noise, dust, smoke, fumes, or odors to the greatest extent possible. Prohibits burning of construction debris, requires any painting or fabrication that occurs on site to be within an enclosed building, and also requires proper storage of scrap and waste materials and proper disposal. Condition number 5, condition number 4 also notes that if any complaints related to these items are received, the applicant is advised that the permit may ultimately be revoked. Condition number 5 requires that the applicant provide community development with an annual report addressing the conditions of approval, making sure there's still compliance with those, and then also addressing any verbal complaints or written complaints that had been received over the past year and what action was taken by the permit holder to address those issues. Condition number 6 advises that any complaints will be investigated through the code compliance procedures and again may ultimately result in revocation of the permit. Condition number 7 limits the amount of traffic by limiting the hours of operation for employees to Monday through Friday between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. So that would be for employee trips to and from the site. Condition number 8 limits the type of deliveries the applicant could receive at this property. So that would be limited to standard carriers such as the Postal Service, FedEx, UPS, etc., and requires that while those delivery vehicles are loading and unloading, they park on the subject property so that they don't block the road. Condition number 9 requires the provision of a restroom for employee use. Doesn't specify where that restroom needs to be located, but one must be available for employees. Condition number 10 requires that the applicant provide community development with a contract for waste collection services and requires storage of any scrap or waste materials to be within an enclosed building at all times prior to disposal, and requires proper storage and disposal of any potentially hazardous materials. Condition number 11 is an advisory that the property is in the flood hazard overlay and that all development shall comply with the flood hazard overlay district. And condition number 12 prohibits on-site retail and advises that if the applicant wishes to conduct any retail activities, which we don't anticipate, that they would be required to contact the planning division to request an expansion of the permit. So that is my summary of the staff report and recommendation and conditions of approval. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ian. Do we have any questions for staff regarding the staff report before we move on to the public testimony from the commissioners?
Well, I have a few.
Commissioner Farrar.
Just going through the list of conditions for approval. My first question would be, in most cases, I'm just asking for a little more detail than what's written up here. On item number 2 there, concerning site obscuring fencing and evergreen vegetation, I suppose within section 3.9530 cited there, it gets more specific on this, but in looking at what I could see from the information provided, a couple of photographs and aerial views of the property as well, it looks like it's kind of difficult to do much to obscure the view of that outbuilding, which is very close to the street or road there. That's the principal access, and I don't see how you can really screen it much because the driveway is the width that it is to allow access to three roll-up garage door kind of things. What are you viewing there as in terms of the screening that would improve kind of shielding the view of the activity there in front of that building?
Thanks for your question, Commissioner Farrar. So this would just be screening that would screen the property from view to the greatest extent possible from adjacent properties. And so there isn't screening in as many places as there could be currently. So that's what this condition is asking for.
Okay, but to me, the main view is straight on at the I guess it's the south facing side of that building, and it's kind of hard to obscure that unless there was perhaps some kind of a rollout gate or something that was pleasing to look at or something that screened it that way. But I don't see that a whole lot can be done about that. But I just kind of wanted to get that clear in my head. I thank you for the explanation there.
Commissioner Farrar, I just say there are a few photos that you can see. There's a kind of a grassy area in front of most of the building. Like there's, where they pull in front of the three garages, but there's a grassy area that could easily have, some escallonia, hedges or a fence or something. So you wouldn't be able to, screen across the driveway necessarily, but there's certainly green areas that you could do something.
Yeah, I guess there are some options there. I just kind of thought maybe the vehicles just go right across the lawn into the bays, but it's too late now. But that building's awfully close to the to the property line. I think it makes it a little hard to shield it from neighbors. I was wondering on item number 4, which lists among other things, the burning of construction debris is strictly prohibited, and all kinds of concerns over fumes and proper ventilation. I was wondering, I don't know how much activity is done right on the lot. It seemed like in some of the material that the applicant provided, it sounds like it's more just storage and pickup and drop off kind of thing, and not so much fabrication or painting going on. But in any case, I'm wondering, some of the public input on this was that there were fumes coming and dust coming off of the property, smoke and odors. And I'm wondering, in terms of a revocation process, if that were to occur, where the permit would get revoked, what is the necessary evidence that somebody needs to provide, and what's the timeliness of that? I mean, it'd be great if you got immediate response, and then you could ensure that a business that was maybe getting a little off track was called to order quickly. Then a neighborhood's quality of life could be better preserved. But I'm just wondering if this is very quick, or does it go through a whole bunch of hoops? How long does it take somebody to get relief if they have a problem with smoke coming onto their property? It's ephemeral, so by the time somebody gets there, it might be gone. And just if you could provide me with a little more input on that, planner
So
assistant.
thank you, Commissioner Farrar. So any complaints that we receive would be investigated by code compliance staff. It's absolutely helpful for the person submitting the complaint to provide any evidence that they can, any evidence that they can, reasonably and safely attain, because code compliance staff aren't, necessarily available at a moment's notice or out patrolling anyone. And so just sort of the nature of the code compliance process, it is very helpful to have evidence from neighbors in whatever fashion that can be. But code compliance staff conducts an investigation and sees what they can find out. And if there's reason to believe that a violation has occurred, the property owner would be notified with a notice of warning, and a code compliance procedure would take place to get that property into compliance with the code. This property, this business has been operated for several years without a permit, and so activities going forward are going to be, if approved, activities going forward would be subject to any conditions of approval the Planning Commission imposes. And so, you're also welcome to modify anything that staff has recommended in whatever way you see fit to improve the possible outcome. But it's also, an opportunity to advise the property owner, the operator of the business, that these are the operating conditions, and if the permit is approved, those are the rules, and putting them on notice that if those rules are violated, there is a good chance that their permit would be revoked. And given the history of and the duration of the unpermitted activities at this particular property, the code compliance process may be more aggressive than in cases where we have a first-time violator.
Thank you. That was very helpful explanation. On item number 9 has to do with the restroom shall be provided for employee use. Is there a time by which this needs to be finished and available?
That's a good question, Commissioner Farr. So there was no timeline established in this condition. We would require it though. So the development permit is required within 30 days if this application is approved. So within 30 days from the final approval date, the applicant would be required to get a signature from the on-site septic program to verify that the employees using the restroom or that the septic system would be able to handle the additional load of employees using the restroom. And so if the applicant, for example, decides to make a restroom in his home available to employees, there wouldn't be any lead time to build out a new restroom. If he decides to build out a new restroom in the shop, then we would address that with the applicant and make sure that happens as quickly as possible. So I'm assuming, I have not discussed this with the applicant, but I'm assuming that we will be able to resolve this issue within the 30 days that the applicant is required to submit the development permit application with the sign off from the on-site septic program.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm just looking through a few notes I have written here. A question I had, you didn't go over the 14 items that are presented on page 23 of our packet, page 19 of the application. But in those, number one talks about if any state or federal permit is required, the applicant will show that they got those, will show the planning department. That's something we always have in there. But it occurred to me, how does one know what permits they need to have and where they get them from? Is that in? It seems like the county would be trying to provide that information to the prospective business owner so that they know what they do need, because there's a lot of things to check on. So how do they go about that and make sure they have all their permits?
So it's generally the applicant's responsibility to find out and to understand what those requirements are. We certainly try to help them as much as we can if there are things that we're aware of that they would need. In this particular case, staff did not come up with anything that we thought the applicant would need from a state or federal permitting perspective. The applicant hasn't provided copies of any, and so you could ask the applicant if he's aware of any state or federal permit requirements. But ultimately, just with any law, it's the responsibility of a person to understand what the rules are and what permits they would need.
Okay, then after that, on number two there, the home occupation shall employ no more than 5 full or part-time persons. And I don't know if that's been completely responded to by the applicant, whether that's the case. And I'm actually not entirely sure how to interpret that. Does that mean that the overall business throughout the whole county or wherever it operates can have no more than 5 employees, or are those the 5 employees in a business that might show up at that property?
So considering that the intent, and I think this was discussed in the staff report, I'm not positive, I would have to reread that section, but considering that the intent of the home occupation standards is to limit the impact of a commercial business on the surrounding neighborhood, I would interpret that to mean no more than 5 employees would be on site. I don't think it's intended to say that somebody can't run a business that has more employees than that. It's really, in my opinion, it's looking at the impact on the subject property and on the surrounding properties. And so it would make sense to me that it only means, it only refers to the number of employees that would be employed on site at any time.
Okay, so that's kind of an important distinction, really, because you can imagine if there were 25 employees, and so 5 of them showed up at 8 a.m. and were there till 9 a.m., and then another 5 came in at 10:30 and stayed there till 11:30, and then a different 5 came in at right after lunch, and so on. It's a lot different than just 5 employees showing up there and then leaving. I understand that the home occupation may have 5 people on site from, I think it's 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. So maybe if it's not the same people, it doesn't really matter. But there's a lot more coming and going if they're, as I see the business and the way it's operated. And I'm reflecting in part on the photograph that was shown of multiple vehicles parked there, and those are obviously coming and going individually, and each one's having its impact. So I would like clarification on what within our county regulations that actually means. Does it mean 5 people at any one time, or does it mean 5 employees. Is it possible to get that?
So, Commissioner Farrar, I think maybe what you're asking for is a revision to the code to clarify that item. And so that's a possibility, not within this hearing itself, but you know, if the ultimate issue is employee trips to and from the site, then you are certainly within your purview to add a condition limiting trips. I hear what you're saying about the number of employees, and if you have, you know, five brigades of 5 employees each, and those are, each brigade is coming to the property at a different time during the day, that would, you know, it sounds like the concern there is the number of trips, vehicle trips being made to and from the property, not necessarily the number of employees, because you could also have a scenario where you have 5 employees and those are the only 5 employees, but they come and go throughout the day. Say they need to go to the store, they need to run home, they need to go somewhere else for lunch. They could make just as many or more trips as the other scenario where you have 5 brigades of employees coming to and from. So if the concern is vehicle trips, again, you're within your purview to limit those in this hearing.
Okay, that is, it's kind of a complicated issue, and it isn't necessary that we resolve that for this application, but I would just say one last point on that is that it seems as though these home occupations were designed for kind of smaller businesses that could be run out of a home and not make a big deal in the neighborhood. But obviously, if you expand the number of employees of a business, it's probably at some point not so much a small business, but it's kind of a medium business, and then maybe it becomes a large business. I don't know. But so it kind of, on that point about the number of employees, it depends on whether it was intended to kind of restrict things to smaller businesses versus any size business that's just running a way to minimize the number of people on the property at one time. So that's a subject for another discussion, I suppose. The
Commissioner
same
Farrar?
thing then. Yes.
Yes. Sorry, Commissioner Farrar, could we stick to just questions to staff right now and we can have discussion after the public hearing?
Sure.
Okay, thanks. Do you have one more there or more?
A couple of minor ones.
Okay.
One has to do with signs, and I understand there's no sign for this business because it's not used as an advertisement to generate business. However, going back to that photo of all the vans parked in front of the place, each one of those in a sense is a sign. And so by sign, you're talking something fixed to the ground, I assume, and people can bring a motorized truck or other vehicle and have signs on it, and those don't count, I'm assuming. Am I correct on that?
That's a good question. I don't believe decals on a vehicle would be classified as a sign. I'm looking up the definition in our code now to just confirm that belief. Just give me a moment here. So a sign is any letter, figures, symbols, or designs which are intended to convey a message or to attract the attention of a person on a public street. It does not specify whether that's attached to the ground or not.
Okay, well, that might not be a big point. One final, just kind of nitpicky thing, which I seem to be full of this morning, and I kind of apologize for that, but I'm just trying to look at every angle here so that it's completely covered. On number 11 there, it's described that deliveries or pickups of supplies or products associated with home occupation are allowed to occur between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. And here it was recommended that rather than large delivery trucks, say from a building supply store or something like that, that you rely on things like UPS and FedEx and so on. And my experience is that when the delivery is made is oftentimes more a decision made by the delivery company rather than the person requesting the delivery. I've received packages at 9 o'clock at night from UPS from when they have a busy day. So I'm assuming that, you know, this is the kind of thing that's a little more flexible, that it's understood that occasionally a business owner may order some supplies and they have no strong control over exactly when it's delivered. And if it falls outside of that time range, but it's not that frequent, that's permissible. Do I have that? Is that kind of how it's generally applied?
So what you're referring to is a standard that's written in the code, and so that is the rule, and we can't change. I mean, we can't change it at this moment. It could be revised to be more flexible. I would say in practice, yes, we're a little bit more flexible with it. I can't think of any complaints that we've received that I'm aware of where, you know, somebody says, hey, my neighbor got a delivery at 6:30 and they're only allowed to get deliveries until 6, or even if it was a delivery that happened at 9 p.m. You know, I think the condition requiring that they're only using standard delivery services is intended that, you know, presumably other people on the same street will be receiving the same delivery or deliveries from the same entities at the same time. And so it's not adding any impact necessarily to the neighborhood versus having, like you referred to, a building supply company you know, park a flatbed truck on the street and unload it with a forklift. You know, where that might happen from time to time in a neighborhood who's doing some home improvement work. It's different when you have a business where that might be happening on a regular basis. So again, the intent is to limit the impact on the neighborhood. And again, those delivery hours are written in the code, and so therefore they're applied as a regulation to this application. And we discussed this also as staff with, you know, can realistically they require deliveries to be within a certain time frame, or can they require the delivery service to park on the subject property and not in the street? And, you know, from experience, you know, we've seen that, especially with services like FedEx and UPS, you do have some control. You know, if you can create an account with those services and give special delivery instructions, there is a degree of control that you can have over deliveries. There's also always the opportunity to pick stuff up at the post office or at a drop site rather than having it delivered directly to your property. So if that's an issue with neighbors, you know, deliveries that are coming from standard delivery services like USPS or UPS, I think that's one that we would, you know, try to work to a solution with the applicant to make sure that we can find something that isn't negatively affecting the neighborhood. But I would expect, again, with the limitation to standard delivery services that presumably everyone else on the street is using, that it won't be an issue.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry to have so many questions, but I'm done now.
Thank you, Commissioner Farrar. You are appreciated in all your questions. Commissioner Orr or Commissioner Kwong, do you have any questions for staff?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Kwong here. I guess one question I have is like, if this business has been operated for the last 6 years, and with the conditional approval, how is it different than prior to approval?
Thank you, Commissioner Kwong. So the home occupation regulations in section 3.8000 would apply to any home occupation in the county. And so, you know, had the applicant gotten the permit before starting the business operation, those certainly would have applied. And conditions 1 through 12 are specific to this application, and they were devised, you know, through this process we're in the middle of now. And so those are not things that necessarily would have been required of the applicant. And so over the past 6 years, there has been some history. You know, this is actually not the first time the applicant submitted an application for the conditional use. In fact, code compliance staff, and this is discussed in the staff report, but code compliance staff was first made aware of this home occupation, I believe in 2015, and contacted the property owner and, you know, notified them that a home occupation permit was required. The applicant then submitted that application. A public hearing was scheduled, but the application was deemed incomplete and it eventually expired. And so this process had started several years back. And for whatever reason, after that application had expired, there were several years that went by until I believe it was spring of 2020 when our code compliance staff became involved again on this property and notified the owner that they still needed the home occupation permit. And so again, this application was submitted to resolve that violation, and those first 12 conditions are specific to this business on this property, while the rest of the regulations are standards that apply to any home occupation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think Commissioner Orr wants to speak, but he's muted. Is Director Henriksen or Ian, could you unmute him? He's having trouble being heard. I don't know if you, there we go. Okay, Commissioner Orr, do you have a question for staff?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for unmuting me. It was frustrating to have my comments solicited and to be muted. I'd suggested in the future that there be some monitoring of the mute button when solicitations for commissioners' comments are made. I would just like to ask some questions of Mr. Sisson. I assume that you visited the subject property? Ian, Mr. Sisson?
I did not conduct
you
a
did
site
not?
visit.
You
No.
did not conduct a site visit?
Personally, I have not conducted a site visit. I've reviewed photographs from code compliance staff, which has been there in person multiple times. I personally did not make a site visit, no.
Okay. So in making your conditional recommendation for approval, you feel comfortable that you have factored what you believe to be the existing use and existing intensity as represented by the applicant with the concerns about preservation of neighborhood character. You feel like that is a comfortable call that you're making there?
Yes, I do.
So I have gotten the drift from some of the comments of the neighbor that the intensity of the use is perhaps greater than represented. I didn't get a direct number from the applicant. In my review of the number of employees, I saw something like 2 vehicles with 2 employees, but if it's in there that is the number of employees the applicant has, I would like to know what that number is. Do you know what the represented number of employees is at this time?
So the information that you just recited is also what I have, but you will have an opportunity here shortly to ask questions of the applicant, and we could have him confirm that for us.
and this is probably in there, but is this a what is the zoning class density zoning classification for the subject property?
The zoning designation is RA1, Residential Agriculture 1, currently has a 2-acre minimum lot size, but the subject property is part of a subdivision that was created a while back and did not have that 2-acre minimum. And so the subject property is just over an acre, about 1.1 acres.
So you feel comfortable with your recommendation, notwithstanding the fact that it is more intense in terms of its use and development than is provided for by the comprehensive plan, and the use that is now being proposed as a conditional use is still more intense?
I'm sorry, could you repeat your question, Commissioner Orr?
No, well, this is a time for questions, and that is definitely veering into the area of comment, so I'll withdraw at this time. Are you satisfied that the applicant and the application of the code is sufficient to address concerns for pollution in the event the area is flooding, notwithstanding applicant's representation that it is never flooded? I'm thinking of the chemicals, the pollution, the placement, location, and quantities of toxic chemicals.
So the flood hazard overlay district does regulate storage and how materials are stored. And so condition number 11 requires compliance with those standards.
Do you feel comfortable indicating whether or not the applicant has read that, understand it, and applied it at this present time?
I feel comfortable that it will be known and is known because I see the applicant here today. It's known by the applicant, and it would be the applicant's responsibility to follow through on that.
So you said you had not visited the subject property. Does anybody who works in county planning or under you visit the subject property?
As I mentioned, Commissioner Orr, the code compliance staff and our building inspectors have been on that property multiple times.
Code compliance staff. Did they check on this particular storage concern?
I'm not sure, Commissioner Orr, if they went inside the building.
Okay,
I see the applicant nodding his head, so it may be that code compliance staff did go inside the building. So.
All right, thank you. Those are the questions I have at the present time. You can mute me.
Thank you, commissioners. All right, so we'll move on. So I see that there's a chat. Maybe that's from staff explaining about the muting situation, but I'll just try to remind staff to unmute him before I ask for commissioner discussion. But I can't open that chat right now for some reason. There's some glitch, so I apologize.
Chair Gardner, it says, if I could read it for everyone, and since John probably can't read it being on the phone, it says *6 will mute and unmute your phone unless it is a rotary dial landline, which I hope Commissioner Orr is not on a rotary dial landline today, but you can do *6 to mute and unmute yourself, John.
Thank you.
I see. So I can bypass your superior muting power by hitting *6? Or am I still muted?
Try it now.
Okay.
*6.
A voice will tell you muted or unmuted when you do that.
Yes, it will. Okay. So there it is. Star. Well, I hit *6.
Not muted.
Okay, not muted. Okay. And so I'm not muted. That means you can hear what I'm saying?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
We can hear you, Commissioner Orr, so we'll keep tabs on you to make sure that you're unmuted at the right time.
Yep.
So
Thank you.
So maybe to make this an effective test, you should mute me first, and then I hit *6. Or did you already?
All right, let's try that. Director
Okay,
Henriksen.
Commissioner Orr, you're now muted.
So now hit *6 and see if you unmute. Sorry, everybody. The joys of technology. It's not working. So, well, we'll just Ian will unmute you when we get to the next place. Okay. So let's go ahead. Oh, you're back.
Yeah. Okay. It must be a delay time. How fun.
Okay. Okay.
Because my iPad service is not good, so I get disconnected. And I must say, I really long for the days with hard copy and in-person meetings. I don't think I can be part of these technological advances because they set me back. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. So we're going to go to public testimony. This hearing is open for public testimony. Failure to raise an issue with sufficient specificity to afford decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the board based on that issue. All speakers from the floor are to state their name and their address before speaking. If you're appearing as a representative, please identify whom you represent and limit your remarks to 3 minutes in order to permit all present opportunity to speak. Testimony and evidence must be directed towards the criteria in the plan, staff report, or land use regulation which the person believes to apply to the decision. Are there any public agency comments? Does the applicant have anything they wish to say?
Can you repeat that again?
So this is your opportunity, Mr. Velasquez, to state anything about your application to the body, to the commission. Would you like to share anything with us?
Okay. Like I said, we tried this like 6 years ago. We put the application in, and we're supposed to be. We paid for the application and everything. We went through the rules it require, and they say that they're supposed to do a hearing. Somehow we never hear about the hearing, no information whatsoever. So I assume nothing happened, and we continue doing as we were doing, and until the we start doing our porch outside of our house, like a patio porch, and we have tried to apply for the permit through the online twice, and they deny it. We thought it was something going on with the system, so we went twice to the building to get the permit for building our shop. You know, we didn't know it was because we didn't have the permit for our business. I didn't know it was tied to each other until a certain time that we have the other hearing about our permit, that we knew that because Ian sent us information, or the other gentleman sent us information that whatever issue it was in the property, they would not give us a permit. So that's when we find out. So we went through the situation with the porch outside, and then somebody was taking pictures about our maintenance private residents doing our own stuff, sending him to them because that we were doing our business here through home. And you know, we have people here that comes and do cleaning. I have to maintain my home. I have to clean it on the back. I have to do cleaning on the shop. So I have people here working, you know, while they were doing their work. And we have been respectful to everybody. We trying to be a good neighbors, keeping to ourselves. You know, we try not to bother nobody. At least say hello to everybody. Whoever say hello, say hello. Who wants to keep to themselves, they keep to themselves. But we're trying to be friendly and not create any problems with nobody. I've been here for almost 7 years. We have situations with a couple of our neighbors, but I always try to keep to myself, you know, and say hello and goodbye, and try to do our business the best we can do, keep it quiet. And so there is a lot of neighbors to the sides, to the front, and they can definitely say about our business, you know. There is some regulations that we need to meet, you know. We're willing. It's not that we're not willing to meet the decision, so that we wanted to run it under the without license. No, we applied 6 years ago, but it never went through. I don't know who dropped the ball, if it was ourselves or it was the county, because we never hear the hearing. So if they send you a hearing, there's supposed to be a date. I never got the date or nothing, like I'm doing right now here with you guys. This is totally different of what we did 6 years ago. So again, I'm here. If there is some stuff that we need to meet, we're willing. You know, I'm willing with all my the people that lives here in this community, because we're a small community, and they can speak for themselves. You know, and they can, if there is something that we can arrange to meet what we need to keep our business, because that's how we bought it. Because there is a business running here for 13 years. It was a mechanic place, and it was a flooring place where semi trucks used to come over here and bring deliveries, and a lot of people used to come here too, you know. And I don't know if you have in your records that there was any permit, that there was business over here. Do you have in your records that there was any complaints about anybody having business here? And now, because the Hispanic guy moves to a place, and they start the complaints, because I don't see any complaints, and I look into the records, there is no complaints, you know. And so now, because the Hispanic might move to a place where we have to have the permit, we don't mind, you know, because that's the rule. We're willing to follow the rules. That's what we're here, to follow the rules, not to break them. But I'm not gonna you say something that is not. If you guys have any proof that there was any permits here, because this is, you guys give the permit to build a shop. That's not a garage. That's a shop, and the county give the permit to build a shop. And that's what a lot of these places were done over here for a shop. There was other people that also apply for a shop. And there is, I have neighbors that they have a shop. They running their business through the shop. But I'm not gonna point people neither, because that's not my business. I'm doing my own business and trying to keep myself and keep surviving and trying to make a good living for my employees. And
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Velasquez. I think I'm going to try to keep your comments a little limited so we can keep moving forward in the meeting. Sorry, I just for the meeting record, I just wanted to clarify. So that was Jose Antonio Velasquez Silva at 34074 West Campbell Loop, Seaside. Do the commissioners, and if someone could unmute John, or he could unmute himself, do the commissioners have any questions for the applicant?
How many employees do you have?
we have 17 employees.
So what's the number of employees that visit your site in any one day?
Well, it just depends. You know, every van has like at least 2 employees, sometimes 3 employees on the van. and they come on the morning sometimes to pick up like ladders or pressure washers or something that it doesn't fit on the van. Sometimes we have more than those guys showing up because they bring in their hours so they can get paid for like the payroll, or if we have safety meetings, we also have more people than it's supposed to be. So it just depends of the date or the time that they show up for the stuff that they require for their job.
Do you have plans for relocating your business or your office away from your current residence?
We bought this place because of the shop, because we need something to keep our materials or tools, to have, and that's why we bought this place. Our office, we do it from here, from home. But we have a new place to where we're gonna be running our office, where probably the employees won't be able to bring their hours anymore to our home, or the meetings will be able to do them on the other place here in Gerhardt.
Let's see. That's all the questions I have for right now. I may have some more later. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Orr. Commissioners Farrar or Lam or Kwong, do you have any questions for the applicant before he turns on his mute again? Commissioner Kwong, do you want to go first? And then I think Farrar also has a question.
Well, yes, Mr. Velasquez, I guess my really only concern is that if you have a monthly meeting with your employees, that when they all come, the vehicles aren't blocking the neighbors. Is that an issue at all with the neighbor when you have that big of a meeting of your employees?
No, we do not block the street. We have our own parking lot. We do not use our street to park in our vehicles. We have our own parking lot where people can park in their cells, and we do not block the street at all.
Thank you.
Commissioner Farrar?
Yes, I was wondering whether you could tell us a little bit about some of the materials that you store there in the building and what you have done to meet any requirements of safely storing them to prevent leakage or escape of any materials off site.
Well, we usually get like a paint primer. We get like a sandpaper, rags. We get our stuff for us mask, for safety equipment. That's pretty much what we get into our storage. They come sealed, and all the usually we pick them up to take them to the job site, because that's where we usually do most of our work on our houses where the customers called us. But usually they're sealed. They have their covers. So we have equipment, for drying out or stuff like that. Humidifiers, air blowers, power washers. That's what we have in our shop.
Okay, I was mainly concerned with liquid things, for example, gasoline that you might store for the power washers or things. And I want to preface it so you understand why I'm asking you about this. I mean, there's a lot of concern that a place where there's materials that potentially are toxic are stored, that if they leaked, they could cause contamination off-site. And so just to make a business like yours a lot more compatible with the neighborhood, we just try to ensure that there aren't dangerous chemicals that could leak or contaminate something. And it's for a benefit of everybody. It's for the business owner as well as the neighbors. You know, if everybody gets along and everybody's compatible, things are good. So part of what we're talking about here today is just trying to ensure that any business that's run in the neighborhood is done in a way where it doesn't create any conflict. And there's no pre-decision here on my part or any of the commissioners that what you're doing is you know, hard on the neighborhood. We're trying to learn a little bit more from you about the way your business is run. And you know, I have great respect for small business people and what they do for the county. So I want you to know that this isn't adversarial. This is trying to work cooperatively to a good solution. Thank you.
Container volumes.
We have a containers that we keep or like a diesel or gas, but they're like a 5-gallon containers, and they have their lids. You know, usually when we're going to use something like that, we test our power washers, and then we get to the job site and we fill it up over there. We try not to keep our machines with a lot of liquid because it tends to damage. It costs us more the maintenance than, you know, because we don't wash every day. It's on and off. So we try to fill it up when it's needed, so that way we don't have to keep so much material that we don't need in there that is unnecessary.
Thank you. If those are all the commissioner questions, you have one more there, Commissioner Farrar?
No,
okay,
I'm done.
Let's go ahead and move on. And Mr. Velasquez, you will have an opportunity to speak again after the public testimony that comes next here. But if you want to put on, you can put on your mute now. So I'm looking now if there are any comments from proponents, supporters of the application. Is there anyone who wishes to speak?
I have a comment.
Okay, please identify yourself and give your address for the record.
Good morning. My name is Gary Phelan. I have lived at 34067 West Campbell Loop, across the street from the Velasquez property, for 45 years. Here's some history to consider. The Velasquez house was built in 2000 and a commercial sized shop shortly after. For 13 years, the shop housed different businesses, such as one bay vehicle repair and body shop, and the rest of it at one time was a carpet warehouse for a Home Depot installation contractor. All this was without any complaints or county involvement that I know of. The property was sold to the present owner, presented with this history. The present business has operated there for 6 years. Some of the complainants' pictures and written testimony is written out of ignorance, such as the heavy material that was delivered for his personal property improvement. Projects and the descriptions of the private access road, West Campbell Loop, which was actually built to specifications for 1970s developments. It's 50 feet wide. If two vehicles can't pass safely, then somebody needs driver's training. It is also posted at 15 miles per hour. I would propose the permit be granted with the condition that the business not be allowed to grow at this site beyond the present use and activity. And if the property changes owners, it cannot be eligible for conditional use. Edgewater has a homeowners association with meetings to address any residents' concerns of the road and water line. This road is a private road. It is Mr. Velasquez's driveway. He owns part of it. He owns all of it or any of it. I hope the suggested solution will satisfy all concerned in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other proponents who wish to speak at this time? Hearing none, we'll move on. Are there any comments from opponents? Mr. Barrett, please identify yourself and give your address for the record. Sorry, Mr. Barrett, we can't hear you right now. Could you check your microphone? You're unmuted. Shoot.
Mr. Barrett, do you have a phone you could try calling in with that?
Looks like he does. We'll give him a second.
I'll see if I can get the instructions up on the screen in case you don't have those in front of you. Okay, can you see that phone number and access code there?
1-877 568 4106. One 877-568. There we go.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now, Mr. Barrett. Thank you. Please identify yourself and give your address for the record.
Dale Barrett, 34107 West Campbell Loop. I live across the street and right adjacent to the easterly corner of the applicant's property.
Mr. Barrett, sorry to interrupt. Could you turn your computer volume down? There's an echo happening.
If I can find the... Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. There's still an echo, but I think we can just work with it. But if you could turn your computer volume down or mute your computer volume, that should fix the issue. So you're just listening through the phone and speaking through the phone.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, let's just go forward, Mr. Barrett.
Okay.
Commissioner Ord says you could just walk away from your computer and speak into your phone, then we can't hear it.
Yes, that is a great solution.
Okay. Is that
Okay,
better?
we can hear you better.
All right. So you got my address, 34107 West Campbell Loop. Lived there. We built our house in 1987. And well before anything was built on the applicant's property. And the property, that's correct, the property was used for a carpet business for a few years, which ended when he sold the property. And it was getting to the point that there were some delivery trucks coming, and we probably would have complained about those trucks, but it ended before we got to that point. After the applicant moved in over 5 years ago, I did contact the county about coming into code compliance with operating a commercial business within the residential property or residential neighborhood zone property. That's after the trucks of the applicant were coming in 7 days a week, all hours of the day, and the commercial use of the property got more intense by having more trucks. They were lighter weight trucks and more employees coming in. It took almost 5 years to get to the point where code compliance from the county actually did something. I know that they were trying to get compliance by doing the home occupation. However, 5 years is a long time to get it to the point where they did have a order that he needed to come compliant and no permits would be issued on the property, which that's what happened when he applied for his remodel on his home. The code compliance folks from the planning department were there. I don't know how he wouldn't have known that they were stopped any permits, and it didn't seem to slow him down when he did his construction. Even though there was a stop work order on the front of his garage, he continued to do the construction until he got it completed last fall. So at any rate, it's not that I don't believe he's trying to be a good neighbor. However, over a year ago, I did stop by and say, it's my understanding that you have acquired a piece of property in the city of Gerhardt that's zoned commercial. Is it possible that you can move your business to that location instead of having all of your trucks and employees coming into the subdivision every morning? And I also had explained at that time I'd rather be a good neighbor than not have to do complaints or anything like that. And his response back to me was, well, I don't really care what my neighbors think. Well, that was, for me, it irritated him, obviously. But what my goal is that Campbell Loop is a private road, as indicated. It was created when the plat was recorded in 1980 or 1976 or 78. It's a 50-foot wide right-of-way. However, the paved road surface is, I believe, only about 18 feet wide. I measured it and put that in my written response to the first request for the public notice of the home occupation. Two vehicles can pass each other if you pull off the edge of the road, particularly if you got a UPS truck, a garbage truck, and a school bus. They can't pass side by side without pulling off the paved surface. There is a 50-foot wide right-of-way, but it's all grass and improvements, so it isn't really built for commercial truck traffic. The applicant, I can't tell you exactly how many trucks he has, but I have seen probably as high as 5 trucks there at a time, and quite often there's a trailer that he brings in towed behind one of them with construction debris on it that they take to the backside and usually burn some of that. So there's also congestion at the entrances of the highway where you come to Highway 101. There's 2 entrances into Edgewater Terrace. You'll have a truck sitting there, one of his work truck sitting there, and you got to pull in. It's a busy traffic from from Highway 26. You got to kind of go around the trucks again. It's a residential neighborhood. We'd like to keep it a residential neighborhood.
I'm going to ask that you wrap up your comments here, Mr. Barrett, just to keep us moving along.
Yes, I'm trying very quickly here, Kay. In regards to the construction debris that's brought in, and some of it's burnt, some of it's put in a dumpster. There is a separate commercial garbage truck that comes about 6 in the morning, about once a week, to pick up the commercial dumpster, but they also burn something back in the back. We don't walk back there and look, but I do smell burning rubber, burning plastic, and it's my assumption it's construction debris. That usually comes in with the trailer that they haul in. The other question I also have is that one of the conditions of approval would be a restroom. Would a portable chemical toilet, one of the ones that they come in and pump, is it going to be sufficient to meet the restroom condition that you put in there? If so, then that's really not adding to the residential neighborhood. In summary, I think the applicant has an existing road. Oh, one more thing. On the road, which is a private road, the county provides no support, no money, no maintenance to the road. That's all the responsibility of the homeowners. So therefore, by granting his conditional use permit means I'm going to help pay for his commercial use of the road out there. He's going to have more wear and tear on it with his 5 or how many ever trucks he has coming in and out on a daily basis. I don't think that is a reasonable expectation of the homeowners to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. I think I'm going to I'm wrapping you up here. Definitely gone past your 3 minutes. I appreciate.
Give me one quick closing, if you would.
Okay, one sentence.
Since the applicant has commercial property in Gerhardt, he could move his business to there, and it would all solve all the problems. That's all I think we're asking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from opponents to the project? Mr. Velasquez, you'll have a minute. You'll have an opportunity for rebuttal next. Any other comments from opponents? Okay, does the applicant have a rebuttal? This is your opportunity, Mr. Velasquez, if you'd like to speak again.
Okay. Our lot over here has paid 3 times more than any of the people that lives here for that road. So that has paid 3 times more in order to do this road. So our lot has paid 3 times more. Not only that, the water is connected to us through here. They have a water situation that goes around that has nothing to do with me. And still, I support the community. I have put money into it so the water line can be maintained or can do anything. So we have done whatever it takes to do our part. It's not, we're here as a community to help each other. And I wouldn't say, no, I'm not gonna help. But I don't think my vans, they're vans, not trucks, they're vans, and they fit perfectly each other. And they have passed each other and they fit perfectly. So that was my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Velasquez. Do any public agencies wish to respond? Don't believe we have anybody. How about staff? I did hear a question in there about the bathroom requirement. Perhaps staff would like to respond to that, or any other issues that came up that you'd like to respond to, Ian?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Gardner. So we have approved chemical toilet or offered a chemical toilet as an option in the past. If that is the case, we would require a copy of a contract for regular cleaning. And then we would also review the location of the chemical toilet on the required final site plan and try to make sure that that is in a location where it's not visible from the public, or in this case, from the private street. And then a couple of other comments. With regard to the use of the private road, I did review the plat, and this is noted in the staff report, but I'll repeat it. It did not specifically preclude commercial activities. Generally, use of private roads and the limitations or permissions for that are going to be a civil matter between the parties involved in that private road agreement. And then I wanted to also point out there's a regulation in the home occupation standards. It's regulation number 13, or development standard number 13, and it limits the number of non-resident employees or vehicles allowed on the premises at any time in conjunction with the home occupation to 3. So that would be no more than 3 non-resident employees or 3 non-resident vehicles. And so I noticed as I was reviewing the conditions of approval that that regulation was not repeated. So I would suggest, if the commission decides to approve this application, that you add that in as a regulation, just so that we make sure we have it in the right spot for easy access for future reference. Again, it is a development standard that applies to any home occupation, but we typically put those in with the conditions of approval just to eliminate any ambiguity and to make them easier to find. So that was regulation number 13 from section 3.8020. And that's all I had.
Thank you, Ian. Could you do me a favor and unmute Commissioner Orr? And let's just leave him unmuted here for this section, as long as he's not too noisy. Commissioner Orr, that's your job. I'm going to start with him. I'm going to start with him. Commissioner Orr, this is the time that we have final questions for either the commenters, the witnesses, or staff before we get into our discussion. Commissioner Orr, do you have any questions?
I don't have questions for the applicant or any of the proponents or opponents. I do have comments and concerns for the staff, and that will figure in my vote. But if now is not the proper time, I'll shut up and you can put me back on mute, as long as you put me back on speaker when the time comes.
Yeah, we'll leave you off mute for this time. So this is last question. So it looks like Commissioner Kwong, do you have a question? Yes.
Yes, Mr. Velasquez, could you speak to the burning of construction material that Mr. Barrett has spoke about?
Yes, definitely. Sometimes there is houses where they have shingles, and usually we separate our shingles from the tar paper, and that's what we burn. I'm sure some of that paper went into those shingles, but we have specifically a gentleman that helped us to separate the shingles with the tar paper to avoid the situation. And that must be one of the things that Mr. Barrett have a smell, but that's all we can burn. You know, everything that is not painted or stained, it has to be just raw wood. The other way, we'll just take it to the garbage. And we don't do it too often because I don't get those kind of jobs so often. I'm not so lucky to get those kind of jobs, you know. In the time that I've been here, it's probably been like 4 times that we have done those kind of jobs that really burn the shingles on the back of our property.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Farrar, any final questions for the applicant, opponents, proponents, or staff?
Just one kind of a little bit related to the last question, and that's the burning of materials on the property. My understanding is the way the conditions of approval for this permit are written, that there will no longer be allowance for burning anything on the property. And I just wondered, is that your understanding also, Mr. Velasquez?
Oh, yes,
So,
Mr. Velasquez.
Can I speak?
Yes.
Okay. So I will no longer bring materials to burn, but I live here in an area where there's brushes, trees, and branches, and I need to have a permit to burn those kind of stuffs, you know. Even though as a private resident, I'm allowed to burn raw wood that it doesn't comes from any material or something that is not chemical involved in there, or am I not?
Ian,
Well,
you want to respond to that? Yeah.
Yeah, if it's okay with the commission, I'll just briefly respond. So the intent here is to prohibit any burning of debris that's related to the home occupation. And this is tricky with home occupations because it's really the honor system for the applicant, because as Mr. Velasquez pointed out, he may burn other things on his property. He might have a bonfire. He might burn raw wood from his own personal projects. And so there can be some ambiguity if you're a neighbor as to, you know, what Mr. Velasquez might be burning and where it might have come from. And so that's where it's really on Mr. Velasquez to understand the requirement is that none of his business related materials, none of the material coming from his job sites or anything like that are to be burned. But he's still, you know, within his rights to do other burning that might be permitted. That's purely domestic related, not business related.
I have another question. This is Commissioner
Yes.
Orr.
Yeah, Commissioner Orr, go ahead.
Okay, this question is for both Mr. Barrett in terms of a quick reply, and also Antonio Velasquez or Susana Juanosta, who said in her October 13th, 2021 letter to Mr. Sisson that and I quote, our employees are at the property approximately 2 times per week, usually on Monday and maybe midweek, depending if they need to pick up supplies. Twice a month they pick up their paychecks, which will cease once we are in our new office. And so that seems to me to be in conflict with what Mr. Barrett observed in terms of the amount of traffic. Given that there are 17 employees, simple math dictates there would be, I don't know, quite a few trips, quite a few employees, quite a few vehicles. And my concern is that 2 times a week is not a very illuminating answer for my question about how busy does this business make this residential area. So I would ask that Mr. Juanosto or Mr. Velasquez and Mr. Barrett respond to this.
Mr. Velasquez, you want to respond?
Yeah. So I'm willing to meet. You know, I'm not the kind of people that I'm just gonna turn it down. You know, we bought this property for that reason and only that reason, and that's why we got informed. You know, and we try to do the best we can. Like I say, sometimes, usually during the time that we're busy, people is not here in the shop. It's on the winter time when we usually get people more, because I bring them to clean my house, to do stuff on my own house, which is personal, has nothing to do with the business. And sometimes, yes, I bring them to the shop where we clean our shop. But if there is a limit that I need to approach, I'm willing to meet. I'm not that, you know, I say we didn't have the permit now because we didn't want to under it. We didn't know we have to at that time when I was naive when I started on this kind of situation, and the gentleman that sold me the house said, we never had a permit. We never had any problems. So that's how naive was when I started the situation, that it created all this problem. But I'm willing to meet whatever requirements you guys are asking for, and the rules that you show me on there in the computer.
Thank you, Mr. Velasquez. I believe Commissioner Orr asked Mr. Barrett if he wanted to respond with his observations around numbers of visitors to the site, if he's still on.
Yeah, I'm here. If you can hear me all right.
We can hear you.
It's pretty simple. It's a commercial business with 17 employees. I don't know, five-ish trucks or whatever he's got. And it's difficult to control employees. I had a company fairly large in size. I chose to put mine in and operate it out of a commercial zone property rather than a residential neighborhood. I believe Mr. Velasquez can try to comply with your conditions of approval, but he's got employees that are going to come and go as they forget a tool or piece of equipment, need some new paintbrushes or whatever, and they're going to come back to get their job done. I think you're going to see more employees come than the county's requirements, which will prompt more complaints, which won't change anything over the period of time as it has in the last 5-6 years. So it's difficult to run a business. I understand all that. I'd rather have the business in a commercial zone. That's kind of why we have planning and zoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Commissioner Orr, do those answer your questions, or did you have additional questions before I move on?
I guess it does. The question was whether the 2 times per week was accurate, and you know, I guess it's just left to inference, but the inference seems strong that that is not an accurate proposition, not an accurate assertion on the part of the applicants about the amount of traffic. It seems to understate it, but that's it.
Chair Gardner, could I chime in on this topic?
Yes, Ian, please go ahead.
So I just want to clarify also that this application isn't to permit the same activities that may or may not have been happening over the past 6 years. This application is to permit a business within the framework of our code. And the framework of our code does not limit the number of vehicle trips to and from a property for a home occupation. And so the conditions of approval, currently they don't have any limit on the number of vehicle trips other than the hours and days that those trips are allowed. So the recommended conditions of approval include a limit of from Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. are when employees would be allowed to come to the site. And so that's when trips to and from the site are allowed to happen. But there's not a cap on 2 days per week or 3 days per week. It's just Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. There is a limit on the number of non-resident vehicles or non-resident employees that can be on the property at any given time, but there's no limit, again, on the number of trips to and from the property. However, as I mentioned earlier, it is within your purview to add conditions to this permit. And so if you found that it would be appropriate to limit the number of trips or the number of days trips can be made, you can do that.
Thank you. Do any other commissioners have questions for staff or the applicant or opponent before we move to discussion? Commissioner Kwong.
Yes. I guess it's a question maybe to Mr. Session. I know, well, at least for me anyway, when I would have that many people I deal with, oftentimes I would have people over and having a beer or two, or just having a party. And when people come and having, to be able to park, and when would that, let's just say the neighbor complained about having more people than parking lots is allowed, is that going to be, the complaints would be come into play in this at all? I mean, people need to have their social life also. I mean, when you have that many people, you want to bring people together. Is that, yeah, I mean, I guess that's my big question, is that how would that come into play with that, anyway, comes up.
Commissioner Kwong, just to clarify, so this is about a home occupation and not about personal life or social time. So are you talking about, if there was an employee party or something like that, or are you trying to?
Right.
Is that what you're asking about?
So
I guess,
I understand the question, Commissioner Kwong. So, and this has come up before with other home occupations where, again, there's some ambiguity between what activities are related to the business and what activities are just your personal activities and your social life. And so, as an example, there's a person who teaches classes out of his home in another part of the county, and they have the same limit on the number of non-resident employees or vehicles or customers that can be on the property at any time. But if that same person had some friends over for drinks or dinner, the neighbors wouldn't necessarily know if those vehicles and those people are there in association with the business or if they're there for a personal social gathering. And so that's just sort of the nature of home occupations, is that there's a gray area and there's some ambiguity from the perspective of neighbors. And so we do what we can to limit these things appropriately. And again, it really all comes back to the applicant, as with burning, to take the responsibility that they are conducting the activities within the limits of the permit. And so, if it's business related, then they are going to be limited to 3 vehicles and or 3 employees on site at any time.
Mr. Velasquez, I'm gonna try to wrap this up here. So if somebody asks you a question, you can maybe work in your response here. Commissioner Farrar, do you have any final questions? Okay, so I think we're gonna go ahead and move on to our discussion. If you'll look at page 21 of our packets or page 17 of this section of the package, commissioners, you have a recommended decision and conditions of approval. Staff is recommending approval subject to a list of conditions, some of which we have talked about, some of which we have not. Staff has also suggested that we potentially add just a reminder of what's already in the code, that no more than 3 employees may be on site at one time. And so we can go ahead and have our final discussion before I close public testimony, and then we'll make a decision after that point. So would anyone like to kick us off with any discussion? Let's see, John, you are off mute, so you can talk.
All right. Well, I'm not going to belabor the point, but given the history of this applicant, a failure to follow through, not really accepting much responsibility for the failure to follow through on the initial application, a lack of knowledge of, it seems, of the issues associated with the burning of, irritating or toxic compounds. It seems like, and maybe understating the amount of activity or traffic, or vehicles, or employees associated with the proposed conditional use home occupation. I find myself sympathetic with the neighbors who objected. Their presentation, particularly Mr. Barrett's, is well documented, and it's detailed, and I find myself persuaded to not support this conditional use. Maybe there's some conditions that can be proposed. It sounds like the applicant is willing to meet those conditions. At least those are his representations. But again, the history and the track record of compliance or knowledge of the conditions is not encouraging, and so I'm leaning against.
Thank you, Commissioner Orr. Commissioner Kwong or Farrar? Commissioner Farrar, start with you.
Well, I'm trying to find some way of making everybody feel okay about this decision, but it doesn't look like that's really very easy to do. And it kind of points up why there is all this concern about little detail things about what you can and can't do on properties. And it's the county trying to just make things more functional where neighbors get along, there aren't conflicts. It helps everybody. Everybody likes where they live better if there isn't conflict. But we also try to allow people to use their land in lots of different ways. And so the home occupation thing is one way of doing that. I think it was envisioned to be really kind of small operations that don't have a big impact. And I'm kind of going with my own belief that Mr. Valquez has tried to run a good business, a small business, a family-owned business that's trying to make a living and try to make ends meet, just like a lot of us are. And he seems to be sincere in his understanding of the impact his business potentially can have to the neighborhood, and probably has had to the neighborhood before maybe he was fully aware of some of the constraints that are typically put upon businesses in that kind of a setting. And on the other hand, I do sympathize with the neighbor, Mr. Barrett, and I thought that the letter he wrote was very detailed and informative. And after reading it, I was rather inclined to not want to support this application's approval. But then there were a number of neighbors all around that general neighborhood, some very close, some a little further away. And they all showed support and kind of a camaraderie that often you find in a neighborhood. And that's a good sign. That's a sign to me that this business can be run in a way where it's not offensive to the neighborhood, doesn't degrade the neighborhood, doesn't affect property values negatively. And so I'm really torn on this, because there's issues about how many people show up at the site that seem like they're not in compliance with what's being proposed here. I don't see, your vans come with 2 people in each one, and 2 of them at a time. Well, that's 4 people. So right there, you've gone over a rule. And I know you're thinking, big deal, 4 people versus 3. But the whole thing goes back to this conflict and the importance of getting conflict out of our world, having people get along. And so I just have to emphasize that it's so important that each little detailed provision here is there for a reason. And a lot of people took a lot of time to spell it out, and it seems like we're nitpicking, but there are reasons for it. And the reasons, if they're followed and people do it, I can tell you, neighborhoods are happier. They're better preserved. Property values are kept up. People don't shout at each other. People are friendly. It's a good thing. So I know I'm kind of lecturing here, and I'll get off my soapbox. I'd like to hear what Commissioner Kwong has to add, or our chair, and I reserve any final decision until I've heard everyone speak.
Thank you. Commissioner Kwong?
Yes. With due respect to Mr. Barrett, and I think there's enough of the neighbors that are supporting Mr. Velasquez, and the staff seems like they have done their due diligence on this. And yeah, I believe this is, I would support Mr. Velasquez on this. I believe that, I really truly believe that the staff have done their job, and with the conditions that Mr. Velasquez is willing to meet, I'm willing to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kwong. So I have a good amount of respect for staff in the work that they've done to try to bring an out of compliance home occupation into compliance. I think it's important that we have home occupations. Are an important way that people can bring economic value to our county, and especially to start new businesses, and bring them into the success that I think Mr. Velasquez appears to have come to over time. I also believe that home occupation should be limited in scope, that they're located in rural areas and in neighborhoods. And at a certain point, as they grow up and succeed, it may be most appropriate to move them to commercial areas. And so I think, there was an assumption, I think, that Ian noted, like why it said you should have less than 5 employees. It was like, oh, well, it shouldn't have been that. It's about vehicle trips. I don't think that's necessarily a correct assumption. I think there's a reason why these restrictions were developed through a deep community process, going through comprehensive planning. Now we all know how deep and hardcore that process is, and the amount of community involvement that happens. Yeah, and so as much as I have compassion for Mr. Velasquez continuing in his current location, it's certainly the most probably financially viable location for him. I also have, I'm a big supporter of planning and of the process that it has come up with these rules and regulations over time. And if you'll look on page 23 under the regulations that apply, number 2, the home occupation shall employ no more than 5 full or part-time persons. I think that's very clear. And then if you look at number 4, no more than 2 vehicles or trailers are to be used, period, in the operation of the home occupation. I think those were developed to ensure that these are not, big impactful businesses in rural and residential communities. And so as much as I respect staff's recommendation, I think I would vote to not approve this condition. And but it is possible that a separate business, a smaller business, could continue to work out of this location if it's granted its own conditional approval that's smaller in scope. But I do think it's, once you get to 17 employees and 4, 6, or 8 vans and multiple deliveries and ins and outs, it feels too big to me to be a home occupation. And I think those regulations support that. Any other discussion before we move on?
Well, just following up on your comments, you hit on some pretty definite points that are made in the codes, and I can't ignore those regulations. I didn't write them specifically, but I understand what they're for. And still, I'd like to see a way where this this can please everybody. I know Mr. Balaquez's business is very useful to our county. I've seen their trucks around. I know they're busy and they're doing good work. So I don't know. That's kind of a off the wall question for staff. I mean, is there a way that some kind of a temporary permit could be allowed till maybe the business could be slightly modified to run a small ass part of it out of this home site, and that maybe a bigger share of it could be moved to a commercial property, which perhaps is something the applicant already has obtained. Is there any possibility of something like that, or is that just too much to take on in a hearing of this sort?
It would probably be too much to take on in a hearing of this sort. Even if they were to just say, we want to use this for our office and not have any employees coming or going, I mean, they could still have 17 employees or 100 employees, or 10 work vans or 20 work vans. And if the home office is the only activity that's actually happening on the property, they would potentially still not be approved for that if the commission interprets the limit on the number of vehicles used in conjunction with the home occupation or employees of the home occupation very strictly. Then that office component wouldn't be allowed. As for a temporary use permit, there is a section of our code for temporary use permits, and there are specific provisions. I would have to double check to see if that would be an option. It is intended to allow a use to continue until a permanent solution can be found. That generally means a permanent solution on the same property. but it's a possible option to explore. That would be a separate application, though it wouldn't be something that you could decide on today.
Thank you.
All right, if we can wrap up our discussion here, and then unless anybody has any final comments, then I'll close the public testimony and we'll move on to motions. We can discuss more then. So let's just go ahead and close the public testimony. So public testimony is now closed. And so if anyone has a procedural motion pursuant to ORS 197.763, I'll be looking for a motion and a second, and then we can have discussion after that.
You need a motion to take a vote on the proposed conditional use permit for Alaska's Paint Company, because if that's what you're looking for, I move that it go to a vote.
Well, so I think the motion would be that, so you could do it a couple different ways. You could just do, so staff is recommending approval. So you could say, I move that, we approve the name of the application, or you could say the opposite. You could also, you could do one of those two things, and then we can also amend the conditions and regulations after that also. So we just need to start with a motion for something, either to approve or not approve, is what I would suggest.
I move that we not approve.
The conditional use request 21000591. So we have a motion. Okay, sorry. Director Hendrickson, are you helping us in procedure?
Yeah, I had put something in chat, but motions are best made in the affirmative, and then you vote against them. If you make a motion to deny, it gets a little confusing, because if you vote yes, you're voting to deny, and if you're voting no, you're voting to approve. So it's better if the motion, even if you're going to vote against it, is I move to approve whatever.
Conditional use
All
request.
right, I would like to withdraw my motion to disapprove, but somebody else is going to have to make the motion to approve.
Thank you. Director Hendrickson, I cannot see the chat, so sorry, for some reason it's not working on my side. So just FYI,
Okay.
if you want to flag me in real time. Okay, Commissioner Kwong.
Okay, I'll make the motions. I make the motion that we approve the application number 21000591 of the home occupation for Mr. Jose Velasquez. And I don't know. Yeah,
that's probably sufficient
so
there.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. So we have a motion from Commissioner Kwong and a second from Commissioner Farrar to approve conditional use request 21000591 by Jose Antonio Velasquez Silva and Susana Juanosta to legalize an existing home occupation on property they own in unincorporated Clatsop County. Discussion. Commissioner Farrar.
Well, if the application is approved and then through some means, perhaps a citizen or resident, a neighbor or whatever, brings it to the attention of the county that the business does not follow the conditions in terms of the number of employees and the number of trips and everything, then I guess it's my understanding that the permission for this home occupation would be revoked, and that would leave the business owner in a position of having to find a new place. I hate to see things go in that direction, and yet I hate to have to be the one just to emphatically say, no, as of today, you can't do this anymore. I'm really in a quandary here, and I think it's something that just happens when people get something started a little bit at a time, and it grows, and it never got off to the right start in the first place. So now it's reached this level where we've got this big balloon in front of us that we don't have a place to fit it. And I'm not sure what to do about it, but I feel it'd be difficult for me to approve something that somebody could question legally as to why we did that. And I wish we had legal counsel here to advise me on that. I have a responsibility to do to the best of my ability to uphold the laws of the and rules of this county. Aha, somebody has appeared. I'd like guidance on this. Can I approve something that I knowingly realize is not meeting all the ordinances or rules that our county has written into the laws of Clatsop County? That's a question to our county council, Joanna Lyons. Yeah.
I see that if it's okay, I see that Ian Season has wants to make a comment.
Yeah, actually a clarifying question. Commissioner Farrar, could you identify what specifically you know to be a violation? I just want to clarify one more time that we're not approving the applicant. You wouldn't be approving what the applicant has been doing up to this date. You would be approving them as if this business has never existed on the property and this is a new thing, and they would be restricted to the conditions of approval that are listed and to the regulations that are listed. So you wouldn't be permitting something that's illegal. You know, it's almost like you're pretending this business hasn't been operating for the past while. You're looking at it as a new application. And again, it would be limited to the conditions of approval and the regulations that are listed. So you're not permitting anything that may not have been legal that has happened up to this date.
I think too, we haven't talked about this yet, but maybe we'll speak a little to the kind of yearly review. Isn't there a yearly review aspect to this application, Ian?
Yes, there is a yearly review. There's an annual report that the applicant is required to follow. And so the applicant would be submitting that report annually to show that the business is still in compliance with all of the regulations and conditions of approval. And they would also have to make note of any verbal or written complaints they had received and what they did to address those complaints. And then Gail has noted in the chat that the application either meets the approval criteria and the code, or it can meet them with conditions of approval. So you're not able to approve an application that's not in compliance with the code. And so again, the staff report outlines what was proposed in the application, what the codes are that apply, and it makes a recommendation and a conclusion that the application as presented can be approved, that it meets the applicable criteria, and recommends a set of 12 conditions of approval that would apply in addition to the baseline regulations for home occupation.
Yeah, and so I just wanted to say, as part of our motion, I stumbled a little bit in that, that the motion is around recommending approval subject to the conditions presented by staff, and then we had a motion and a second for that, and then we could, if we chose to, if we're trying to find some middle ground. I know we have that recommended no more than 3 employees at a time. That would go under, I think, regulations. But we could also look at vehicle trips or other things that we felt like would make it more tenable as a home occupation if we chose to as a body. Sorry, Councilor Lyons-Antley, did you want to speak at all to Commissioner Farrar's question?
I want to just say that I think staff here is amazing and answered far better than I probably could have Commissioner Farrar's question. But I think really that's what the refining of the conditions is for. So if you have a concern and the conditions can be crafted to address that concern, I think that's the role of Planning Commission, and I think staff is able to help you do that. But I don't hear anything specific about the conditions that have been proposed by staff. But I would recommend, this is a new, as if it hadn't been permitted use, and what conditions are you adding to it to make it acceptable and in compliance with our zoning and land use codes, and to be consistent with the values that you share as a planning commission. I think that's the important part, the criteria of approval. So I'm happy to help answer any further questions. I would just say if compliance is an issue, it's going to be an issue that's going to be dealt with if it's approved and with those conditions at a future time frame. That knowing that somebody can't comply, it's really not the question in front of the Planning Commission at this point. So does that help?
Thank you, Commissioner Farrar.
Yes, all that discussion helps a lot, and I want to just go on record as saying I appreciate the job the staff does in trying to fix these properties that have something going on that weren't properly permitted. I think that's good, and I understand the idea of taking it on as a new application. It's like it's a new business starting up. It's going to behave in a certain way if it follows the conditions, and that's good. That's a good thing to do. I like that. But the one stumbling block I have is that item number 2 that says home occupation shall employ no more than 5 full-time or part-time persons. And we heard testimony this morning that says there are 17. So if this is approved, that would require 12 employees to be let go or something to that effect. And so that's why I have a quandary, and that's, I guess, something I'll have to balance here very quickly.
Thank you. I just want to check in with Commissioner Orr since he can't see us. I don't know if he's trying to say anything. Did you have anything to say before?
I have nothing further. I'm opposed to the application. The proposal doesn't approach what a home occupation is in my mind and what is contemplated within my interpretation of the code. It's a difficult case, but Mr. Velasquez's business does seem to be successful, and it's growing. It's going to grow, and it will not. The current location wouldn't accommodate the growth for such a promising business as his.
Thank you. Ian, did you have anything additional to say?
No, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Shall we go ahead and vote? Or does anybody have, this is our opportunity also to amend conditions if we wanted to do that. We can get tricky with our motions and approval. If we're ready to vote, we can go ahead and vote. Yes, Commissioner Farrar.
Well, we were advised at one point earlier to consider adding a condition that I didn't get the wording of exactly, but it had to do with regarding the number of employees that are non-residents at any one time, limiting them to no more than 3 persons at one time, adding that. So I don't know if I should move to add that provision, and maybe Planner Sisson could read the actual clear definition of what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Farrar. So for clarification, for the record, the standard that I had recommended is added into the list of regulations, not as a condition of approval, but as a regulation, because it's already part of our code, is section 3.8020, subsection 13A. Not more than 3 non-resident employees or vehicles are allowed on the premises at any one time in conjunction with a home occupation in the RSA, MFR, RA1, RA2, and RA5 zones.
Got that, Commissioner Farrar?
Yes.
So
I don't think you need to repeat that at all. It's in the record.
Okay.
okay,
That's
so
good.
you could make a motion to add a regulation to the conditions of approval as staff has read. Would you like to do that?
Well, it doesn't seem like it's necessary. It is part of the regulation, as I understand it. And although it would be handy maybe to have it listed here in print, it's not necessary. There's a lot of things that aren't in print in front of us, but it does apply, and so we don't need to add it, as I understand Planner Sisson's comment.
Just for additional clarification, what I heard you say, Commissioner Farrar, is that you would amend the motion to add that as a regulation. Is that correct?
If that's necessary, maybe it applies anyway without us specifying it here today. I don't.
It does. So as I had previously stated, the 14 regulations that are listed in addition to the conditions of approval are all code requirements, and we typically include those for clarification so that the applicant has them easily accessible. They don't have to go open up the code. When we send a notice of decision, after the cover page is the list of conditions of approval and regulations. We assume that sometimes that's the only thing people look at. They don't necessarily read the staff report or crack the code open. So we list those regulations there right up front so that they have them for easy access and don't overlook anything. So my suggestion was to include that one, number 13A, in the list of regulations for that purpose.
Yes, that sounds good, and I don't know if that requires a motion here or not, but if it does, I'm moving that we include that additional code requirement to the list that's shown on our page 19 of the application that would specify the number of non-residents allowed at any one time operating on the business property.
Thank you. So we have a motion to amend the conditions to add that regulation. Do we have a second for that motion?
I'll second that.
Commissioner Kwong seconds. Any discussion on just that amendment? All those in favor?
I have a question. I have a question. Sorry.
Yeah.
Is the effect of a yes on that amendment? I mean, I think I know the answer, but is the effect of my voting yes on that amendment should not be interpreted as approving the vote on the ultimate question raised by my motion on the conditional use proposal.
Correct.
Okay.
So this is the motion. This is the motion to amend the conditions to include that additional regulation as recommended by staff. Any other discussion on that before we vote? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 That motion passes unanimously. Any other discussion or motions to amend before we go back to the main motion? So the main motion is to approve the conditional use request 2100591 by Jose Antonio Velasquez Silva and Susana Juanjosta to legalize an existing home occupation on a property they own in unincorporated Clatsop County, 34074 West Campbell Loop, Seaside. If we're ready, we can go ahead with that vote. Any further discussion? It's been moved and seconded. Let's go ahead and do a roll call vote for this one, just to be very clear. So Commissioner Farrar, how do you vote?
I approve.
Approve. Okay. Commissioner Lam, how do you vote? Or Kwong, sorry, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Orr, how do you vote?
No.
And I also vote no. So that ends up being a tie. So how does that work, Director Henriksen or Ian?
It means that the motion fails. So the motion to approve with the amended condition or amended regulation failed. So now you can either let that stand and the application is denied, and then the property owner can appeal that to the hearings office, actually to the Board of Commissioners, or you can make another motion, maybe with a different amended condition of approval. It's at your discretion. But right now it's denied because the motion failed.
Thank you for that clarification. I really appreciate it. All right, so we voted. It was a split vote. It was a hard decision, I think, for all of us. We can, I can entertain a different motion now if we're interested, or we can move on to our next agenda item.
Well, I don't know if we can discuss this a little bit. I voted the way I did on the grounds that conceivably the applicant could follow all the regulations that are listed on that last page that aren't conditions, but they're actually code regulations. There's 14 of them there, and we added the other one. And then the business with the 5 employees would be something that the applicant would have to deal with in whatever way. And so to me, that meant that I could throw open that option that the applicant, and it's really 2 applicants, it's a joint application, and I don't mean to diminish the other person who's involved in it, Ms. Honosta, probably not pronouncing that right, but at any rate, my point is that this business has grown to the point where it doesn't fit very well with the home occupation. So the business owner could possibly revise the business in a way where it's a sub part of a bigger operation. I don't know, but I didn't want to limit the potential there that could be done, because it seems like there's a lot invested here, and at the same time there's a need to not let these small businesses grow into large businesses in a neighborhood. So it's very difficult, and I don't know if there's any way we can proceed at this point, or how quickly something could be done to come back before us and try to make something work for everybody. I don't know where to go from here.
I think we should move forward.
Okay, Commissioner Kwong, do you feel okay about moving forward, or do you have other ideas?
Well, at this point, I don't know what idea I can possibly come up with. The application is in front of us. The staff had done the due diligence with the codes. The applicants are willing to meet the regulations, and we voted on it. It's too bad we don't have enough for a tiebreaker to go one way or the other. And alas, all we have is 2-2, and the application failed at the moment. I don't know what else we can possibly do at the moment.
Thank you. The applicant does have the opportunity to appeal this to, I understand, a hearings officer. So that's an opportunity, or to bring forward a different application in the future. So I would also agree that we should just move forward. I thank everyone who took the time to be here with us today, and thank you. So let's go ahead and
just for
move
the record,
on.
that appeal would go to the Board of Commissioners.
Oh, the Board of Commissioners. Thank you. So so an appeal would go to the Board of Commissioners, not to the hearing officer. Thank you for that clarification, Ian. It is 12:45. I might recommend that we take like at least a 5 or 10 minute break right now, to not for the commissioners especially, to be able to take a couple minutes to have a bite to eat and visit the restroom. I need a motion to do that. What do y'all think?
Can I have a question?
Sorry, Commissioner Kwong, what were you saying? And then I'll come to you next.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure it out. Well, I have to be somewhere at 2 o'clock, which means I have to leave here at least by 1:30. So I'm trying to figure out is how much time more do we need to go through the rest of the agenda?
Yeah, it's running long today. So I think when you leave, we lose our quorum. So
Right.
It means we'll have to end our public hearings at that time. So I think we should try to get through as much as we can, and then we just have to continue when you leave. Staff, correct me if I'm wrong, but let's just give me 2 minutes to grab a bite to eat.
Can we take 5 or 10 minutes? I mean, staff has been in the same meeting that you have been in all the morning as well.
So your camera's off, so I can't tell if you're just eating your lunch right there, Gil. Okay, let's take 5 minutes, because that
I'm not eating my lunch
because Commissioner Kwong has to leave. So I just want to make sure that we maximize his time with us. So can I just have a quick motion that we take a 5-minute recess in a second?
Okay.
I move we take a 5-minute recess.
Okay, Commissioner Orr and Kwong seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Aye.
see you in 5 minutes. Ready
This
for coming back.
conference will now be recorded.
Thank you. We are back at the Tuesday, February 8th, 2022 Clatsop County Planning Commission meeting. We are on agenda item number 4, revisions to Clatsop County Comprehensive Plan Goal 9, Economic Development. Staff has requested a continuation of the Goal 9 hearing until April 12th. Would staff please make the report?
This is Julia Decker, Planning Manager, and the reason for the request is there was simply not enough time due to the extent of the requested revisions to Goal 9 for staff to make those revisions and get the material out to you in time for today's agenda. So staff is requesting a continuation to April 12th.
Thank you, Julia. Do any of the commissioners have questions or comments before we make that decision? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to continue the Goal 9 hearing until April 12th, 2022.
I move we continue the review of Goal 9 until April 12th meeting of the Planning Commission.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
It's been moved by Commissioner Farrar and seconded by Commissioner Quam to continue the Goal 9 hearing, the Clatsop County Comprehensive Plan Goal 9 Economic Development hearing until April 12th, 2022. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes unanimously. We'll move on now to, agenda item number 5, revisions to Clatsop County Comprehensive Plan Goal 7, Natural Hazards. This is a legislative hearing regarding the Clatsop County Comprehensive Plan Update Goal 7. Will the staff please make their report?
Yes, thank you. For the record, Gail Henriksen, Community Development Director. This hearing deals specifically with Goal 7, which are areas subject to natural hazards. And when we look at our statewide planning goal, the purpose of Goal 7 is to protect people and property from natural hazards. Pretty simple goal. When it comes to implementing ordinances at the state level, Oregon administrative rules, there are none that implement this goal. So we do have a lot of leeway in how we enact our policies and implementing ordinances. Statewide Planning Goal 7 identifies the following hazards: floods, landslides, earthquakes and related hazards, tsunamis, coastal erosion, and wildfires. And we are required as the local government to adopt inventories, policies, and implementing measures that address each of these hazards listed above. So within Clatsop County, we have recently been doing a lot of work and continue to do a lot of work with regard to hazard mitigation. In March of 2021, we worked over the course of a year or so with several local special districts and other municipalities to adopt the multi-jurisdictional natural hazard mitigation plan, or the MJNHMP, because it's a very long title. The board adopted that in March of last year, and it addresses all of the hazards included in statewide planning goal 7, and also includes drought, winter and windstorms, and volcanic ash fall. And you'll see that those have been included in your draft of goal 7 for your review today. Another project that we have ongoing, and hopefully we'll be wrapping this up in the next few months, is a Tsunami Evacuation Facilities Improvement Plan, or a TFIP. And this is a partnership that we are working with through ODOT and Department of Land Conservation and Development. And the purpose is to identify ways that we can integrate our evacuation route system and our recreational trail system so that we can create routes and trails that will function year-round as recreational facilities, but then also would be available in times of emergency to be used as evacuation routes out of danger areas. And the particular emphasis is on tsunamis. So that process will be moving forward. We're going to go to the Rural Recreational Lands Planning Advisory Committee in March. We'll be bringing the draft report to the Planning Commission in April, and then hopefully with a final adoption anticipated in May 2022 by the board. And the policies that have been recommended in that draft report have also been included in the draft of Goal 7 that you will be reviewing today. And then finally, both the Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan that was adopted in March and the draft of Goal 7 that you're looking at today are based, a lot of the recommendations are based on the climate change projections that were done in February 2020 by the Oregon Climate Change Research Institute. And that study, which is tailored specifically to Clatsop County, looks at what will happen in the years, what our projections are between basically 2020 and 2050. And that report found that extreme heat events are likely to increase, that intense rain events will probably increase. Same thing with winter flooding and coastal erosion. We will be subject to more frequent droughts and an increased wildfire risk. And because of that, we will experience decreased air quality because of those wildfire events. So we took a draft of Goal 7 to the board back in November of last year, and I do have all the board comments and concerns listed in the cover memo that's in your agenda package. I'm not going to go over them in their entirety, but basically what the board wanted to see was an emphasis on resilience, preparation, response, recovery, making sure that the policies that we recommend for inclusion in Goal 7 don't target one specific industry, but that we're looking across all the industries and businesses in our county and finding ways to support them in terms of our recommendations on hazard mitigation. That our goals should be SMART, which means specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And that we should, while we need to look globally, we need to be acting locally, as the famous longtime bumper sticker says. So that's a brief summary of the board discussion. I know that we have limited time left this afternoon, so I'm going to end my presentation there and just to be available for questions right now.
Thank you, Director Henriksen. So I direct everyone to the page 68 of the packet today with the cover memo. And then there's a great table there that talks about specific sections of the Goal 7 and specific conversation that board members had, Board of Commissioner members had about particular topics. Also, there's a letter from our local expert on disaster preparedness, retired Pat Corcoran, in there also. So we have just a little bit of time to delve into the statewide planning Goal 7. Let's see. So do we have any initial questions of staff on, so these are questions on the staff report before we take the public testimony, and then we can get into discussion after public testimony. Sounds like nobody has any questions. So this hearing is open for public testimony. All speakers from the floor are to state their name and address. If you're a representative, tell us who you're representing and limit your remarks so that everyone has a chance to speak. Does anyone wish to speak today? Since no one's here, I'll assume no. Public testimony is now closed. So discussion is now open for Planning Commission members on Goal 7 natural hazards. Commissioner Farrar.
Well, I'll just make mine real general. It seems like quite a bit of the work's been done for us by the committee with the real long name, the Multi-Jurisdictional Natural Hazards Mitigation Plan Committee, and their report of, I think, March of last year. In it, it lays out a lot of very helpful information. I haven't read it page by page. It's 505 pages long, I think, and I recommend everybody go through some of that and kind of look at how it fits, or how our current draft of the comprehensive plan for Goal 7, how well it matches with what's said in that document. And then we also have the the tsunami evacuation implementation plan, which also is relevant to that one very particular and threatening hazard that we face that nobody wants to face. And I just think that the way to approach this is the county's already put in a lot of time and effort on these two plans, the multi-jurisdictional one and then the one that focuses on tsunami, and that those have a great deal of validity to them. There was a lot of information that was accessed to make sure that the facts in there were correct, and there were a lot of people, local people, that looked at that and came together and evaluated things. And so I think it should have high standing, and that the recommendations that are in there, or things that can easily be turned into recommendations, are what we should follow. It makes sense to go about this in a logical way that's well supported with, you know, a foundational document. And so I think to a large degree, that's what I see in here when I looked at the objectives and policies for Goal 7. I see a lot of those things from the multi-jurisdictional plan to be reworded in a way that's consistent with policies and objectives and that sort of thing. So I think it's all good. I think the challenge will be that it's a difficult sell to the residents of our county and to the Board of Commissioners that hazards have to be faced up with. It's the unhappy goal. It's a goal that we wish it wasn't there. Like, we wish we had no hazards. Or actually, I got to be honest, I worked in U.S. Geological Survey, and about my last 20 years, more than half of my time was dedicated to volcanic hazards assessment. And so I kind of like hazards. I like earthquakes. I've been in them. I don't want people hurt. I don't want property damaged, but they're exciting. They make the earth a living planet. But that aside, for the most part, hazards are something that it's hard for people to want to take up and address. And my feeling is that if we do it honestly, openly, and smartly, I don't know if that's even good English, but if we do it in a smart way, we can actually improve property values and improve the way people look upon Clatsop County, and give us a path forward into the future that will be progressive and can make it where our county has overcome something that's a challenge, and we've done it well. And that tends to give people confidence to invest money here, to create jobs here, to build things here. If they see it as just a county that wants to ignore these real hazards that are out there, then we're going to forever be treated as a do nothing, know nothing, bad place to invest time, money, or human resources. So I hope that somehow we can, you know, bring the Board of Commissioners along, which, and I'm saying it that way because some of the comments that are in that list of general statements that were made, while they're all well-meaning and they're all, I understand where they're coming from, they seem to be more in the frame of how can we make this sound not so bad? How can we do the minimum that the state's going to require? And I just don't think that's going to play well for the long run. It may work for a year or two more, but at some point, the insurance companies, you know, they're realistic. They want to make money. They don't want to lose money. So we've got to face up to this. We have to have realistic goals. I think some of these things are more of a regional nature, and that we should also be interacting with our adjacent counties, and that's wildfires fit in that category. Certainly tsunami impacts, earthquakes, and with those earthquakes, the big ones, lots of landslides will be released, and those will be across multiple counties as well. So all this stuff, even though it's not fun to entertain the reality of it, we need to start working on it, and we'll be in a better position to get grant money from the state and from the federal government. And we'll be in a much better position if we can just focus in on biting into this thing. And maybe there needs to be something in here where we start off with some specific things that we get done, and then we come back every year, or I think every year, and see if we got it done. And then what's the next step? There needs to be a process here to go through this. It's big, it's huge. That's why that one report's so long. So those are some of the things I'm thinking about right now. And I'll let somebody else get some time in here, because I know time is short right now for this meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Farrar. So if we could try to tackle the first section, which is the narrative first. So starting on page 82, this is our final opportunity to review and give feedback to staff before recommending this to go. I suspect we won't get through this today, but at least we can give some initial feedback on at least this section if we don't get to the policies. So if we could try to focus on that to start out with, if Commissioner Kwong or want to give their 2 cents, and we'll get back to Commissioner Farrar, because I know he has some specific suggestions for this section. Any comments, Commissioner Orr or Kwong? You did spend a lot of time with this. Okay.
Have I been unmuted to speak?
Yeah, we can hear you. Thank you, Commissioner Orr.
Yeah, I have nothing to further add at this time.
Yeah, I think it looks good myself. I know Christopher Farrar has a few comments on it. I will just say, yeah, like I think a lot of these natural hazards connect, so they're not different. I mean, they're not necessarily separate. So like if we have an earthquake, we're going to have a lot of landslides. So it's important, I think, to connect the dots there, that it's not just individual events, just, and then flooding could be caused by, will cause mass, will be caused by tsunami when it comes, and erosion. It's just all connected. So, I would look to staff to just make sure that these sections really connect the dots in that way. But otherwise, it looks pretty good to me. Director Henriksen.
Yeah, so this is the draft that you as the Planning Commission will be making a formal recommendation to the board on. So as staff, we wouldn't typically go in after your formal recommendation and continue to make changes to the document. So if there are changes, then I need to know what those are. And I forgot to mention in my presentation that I forwarded comments to you this afternoon from Oregon Shores on Goal 7. I think she's got 7 or 15 pages of comments about the goal, which I have not had a chance to review. But if there are specific changes, then we need to make those today or whenever your next public hearing is on this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, so I was just, for the sake of discussion, I wasn't making a motion. I was just kind of saying that was something I was just noting. So we as a group can make motions to make particular changes, for sure. I think though, if something is like a typo or just fixing a key on a graph or something like that, you can still make those changes after this meeting. I did notice like earthquake is spelled incorrectly, like there's just like a few little things. But if we're doing anything substantial, I understand we'll have to make a motion, make a decision in this meeting. I don't think, like I said, I don't think we're gonna get through. And it's unfortunate that that comment, I saw that while we were on break, that comment came through, but if we're delayed this time, we can see that comment again at the next meeting from Oregon Shores. Commissioner Farrar, do you want to go back to your specific comments in this section?
Yeah, quite a few of these are little tiny edit things that I spotted, and I realized, I had clipped out 4 or 5 pages from about page 110 of our packet to about page 114. And those correspond with goal 7, page 29 and forward from that. And so just in that table, I understand what happened, that there's a little byline that's supposed to be up there in the header that says all dollar amounts are in thousands. So that would fix that problem of property value or estimated building values, and other little tiny things like the asterisk up there needs to go with the 1% flood. So those kind of things, I don't know if they're not clear, somebody can call me and ask me what the heck I'm talking about. But sort of a discussion point is, I feel like something should be said, or maybe it's in here and I just missed the paragraph or something, about the categorization of landslides as low risk. In general, that's true, but there will be a tremendous amount of landsliding if there's ever a magnitude probably 7 or above in this nearby region. That'll trigger landsliding, and it won't be really low risk. It'll actually endanger lives at the scale we're talking about here. A lot of homes will come apart and come down, and if it's at night, there'll be people sleeping in them. So I don't know if we can add just a few sentences in there in some way, or maybe just a footnote saying there is the possibility there could be extensive landsliding that could cause a great deal of harm. And then I mentioned when I was blabbing at the beginning here about
You know what, Commissioner Farrar, why don't we take one thing at a time? And if you want, like, so as we were saying, if you're focused on landslides, do you want to like make a motion around that and like take care of it before you move on to another topic, unless it's something that's related?
Well, could we just add 2 sentences there that there could be a connection to really large earthquakes producing multiple landsliding over a broad area that could maybe it's in there.
So are we looking at page 110 or 29 under landslide?
Yeah, in that area. Maybe it's picked up further on where it's, talked about. I'm not sure, but earthquakes is the topic right after landslides, so it'd be logical just probably in the landslide section, just maybe at the very end there, just have a sentence or 2 saying that because our area can expect to have a large magnitude earthquake sometime in the future, and that's all cited in that section about earthquakes, that we have to face the reality that the sliding could be far more than what we've seen historically. Far greater number of slides, size of slides, and properties affected.
It is kind of funny there's landslides all the time, right? Especially those of us who live on highways or rely on the highways know that they get closed all the time by landslides. Like we have one in Arch Cape that happens every year. And then that one on Highway 30 last year was hugely disruptive. So I don't know if I would say that they're not common, but I do agree with you. I mean, so it looks like that there was a analysis that said that it was that we're low risk. Maybe
Yeah,
we just stick with that. That's
they're
what was
common,
happening.
but they're common, but usually they're isolated. And so they're, you know, even though that one on Highway 30 affected a lot of people just where it was, it still didn't affect the whole county. It didn't bring down our emergency services or anything. But if we get a really big magnitude earthquake, there could be so much sliding that there'll be real major restrictions on movement of vehicles on roadways, and emergency access will be greatly limited, and it'll be of such an extent that it will strain emergency responders. So I think it's good to emphasize that point. Just again, so that the outside world knows that we're aware of these things and we're going to do something about it. We're going to be prepared.
Commissioner Kwong, I recognize it is now 1:30, so you need to go. Is that right? Yeah. So because we do not have a quorum after he leaves, we're going to have to wrap this up. So let's see, what's the right way to do this? I think we need a motion to continue the hearing. And Director Henriksen, do we just continue it until the March meeting? Is that appropriate? I know the other one was continued until April.
Yeah, if we could continue to March, and you'll also need to continue goal 13, and we'll leave it at that. Yeah. So continue
Great.
this hearing till March 8th, and then continue goal 13 till March 8th.
Okay, so I would love to entertain a motion and a second to continue. Can we do them both at the same time? Or do them separately? Probably separately. Separately, okay. So I need a motion to continue goal 7, draft 3, Clatsop County Comprehensive Plan, goal 7, natural hazards until March 8th, 2022.
Okay, I move that we
Do that.
that we reschedule the hearing on goal 7 of the Clatsop County Comprehensive Plan and move the hearing to our March meeting, which is what date?
March 8th, 2022.
March 8th,
So
2022 meeting.
do we have a second?
Yes.
Commissioner Farrar, could you repeat the motion?
I'll repeat it right now, okay?
I'm sorry, I'm being silly. I don't need it repeated. And I heard the second. I'm ready to vote.
Okay, well, I have to anyway. That's my job. So we have a motion from Commissioner Farrar and a second from Commissioner Kwong to continue the Clatsop County Comprehensive Plan Goal 7 Natural Hazards hearing until the March 8th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 The motion passes unanimously. Now we need the same motion, but with Clatsop County Comprehensive Plan Goal 13.
Okay, I move that we move the goal 13 comprehensive plan for the Planning Commission to March 8th meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Kwong. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, so it's been moved by Commissioner Kwong and seconded by Commissioner Orr to continue the Clatsop County Comprehensive Plan Goal 13 hearing until March 8th, 2022. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. The motion passes unanimously. So Did I do that all correctly, Director Hendrickson? So due to lack of quorum, we'll have to adjourn our meeting. Do I need to do a motion to adjourn the meeting, Director Hendrickson, since we're closing before completion? No. Okay, so we'll go ahead. Okay, thank you. So we'll go ahead and adjourn the Tuesday, February 8th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. And thanks all for your time. We'll see you on March 8th. And before that, the County Community Advisory Committee Planning Commission Joint Comp Plan Update meeting next week. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your week. Thank you so much.
Wednesday at 9 a.m. next week for that?
No, it's February 22nd at 9.
So 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
All right. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
You too.